Hi, John. It's nice to see you again. I just thought it'd be a nice opportunity for us to catch up, particularly after all the changes last year. I know we've just reached the end of the first tax year after the new non-dom regime. One thing I sort of noticed, I think, was a rise in the use of investment products
Mm.
for the high net worth individuals, which seems like a bit of a throwback to when I started my career maybe 20 years ago.
Yeah.
But is this something you've noticed as well?
Yeah. So also, hello, long time no see. And thank you. It's good to be on here and good to have an opportunity to speak. So yeah, as you say, a year has now passed since the significant changes that came about last year, and I totally agree. What is it that we're seeing? Well, we're seeing an increased desire to benefit from roll up as far as possible. Because really, and why is that? Is the question. Is because well, the remittance basis is dead, and the protected trust regime that basically allowed income and gains to roll up in trust tax free is also gone by the wayside to an extent, where we've got UK residents settlers. And so the natural consequence of that is greater consideration to solutions that potentially enable a deferral of tax charges and prevent what is otherwise taxed on a rising basis. And so, as you say, that has led to increased interest in a number of things, whether it's specific investment products, whether it's forms of investment vehicles themselves, um, and just kind of planning steps generally, as compared to what used to be the case, which is, oh, you're a high net worth individual originally from outside the UK. What you should do is bang this all into a trust because it's basically great in the long term. No worries. So totally agree with you. We're seeing a lot more of it.
Do you think it would be different if the anti-avoidance legislation wasn't drafted in the way that it is, such that, if you're having everything attributed to you, you at least get it? I think that's, from what I've seen, that's the real concern for the settlers that we work with, which is that, they're getting these massive, potentially massive income tax and CGT charges without actually necessarily seeing any of the returns themselves. Particularly if you look at capital gains, where they may not even be a beneficiary
Mm,
of the
yeah,
trust. Yeah, that's quite a tough pill to take.
no, I agree. It's a totally valid point. Um, because as you say, you can find yourself in a position where you would, and it may be, yes, you've absolutely got some rights to reimbursement, but the point is that you are
That I was going to say that one's tricky under Guernsey law.
okay. Well, that so again, a potential difficulty, even if the out is already potentially difficult, then you're totally right. The problem is um, there will be circumstances where people are subject to significant tax charges without the ability to pay for them, and so it naturally um, it speaks to, well, what solutions are there which can mitigate this for as long as possible. I think another behavior as well that has been that resulted from the changes is also people aren't necessarily. I think a lot of people who I've spoken to would have considered, oh well, how long was I going to stay in the UK before these changes? And the answer to that question is, well, how long am I going to stay in the UK now these changes have occurred? Is a very different answer. Clearly, you had people that left on hearing any on hearing the changes. People just left immediately, and that's fine. They're in a separate bucket. But of course, there are a number of people who weren't able to leave for whatever reason. But that period that they're envisaging staying in the UK has definitely shortened for a significant proportion of them. And as a consequence, again, and for a not dissimilar reason, if you're eyeing a kind of only temporary stay in the UK, then the ability to kind of roll up investment returns for that shortened period is an attractive one. If you can then return back to wherever you had originally relocated from or elsewhere.
Yeah, I
Um,
think we've seen a lot who are eyeing up that 10-year cutoff. They don't want to be dragged into the inheritance tax net. So they may already be outside the FIG regime of the 4 years, but if they can access this deferral, as long as they're not here come 10 years' time, they're sort of quite happy.
yeah,
But I think anything beyond the 10 years is sort of almost like just a no now.
yeah. Because I mean, so what have we got now? Okay, well, we've got a really beneficial impatriate regime. But by the way, it's only for 4 years, so that's all's well. But okay, realistically, lots of people are already outside of that, and the people who can benefit from it are kind of slightly outside this conversation because they don't have to worry about anything until they get to that 4 years. But then you've got a big bracket of people, as you say, who are then subsequently hit with a rising base of taxation from year 5 onwards. That can include a bunch of people who've got stuff in pre-existing trust structures, and we have the problem of the attribution without recourse to the underlying assets, which you were talking about before.
Or,
And then
or an inability to wind them up if they're in the arising regime with no FIG.
Yeah.
Outside of the remittance basis, because as soon as they take a distribution, acknowledging there's a temporary repatriation facility available, which might be a cheaper option, but effectively that money is stuck unless they want potentially quite significant tax charges on trying to dismantle the trusts.
Yeah, agreed. And then just finishing off on what you were saying is you've only got that final kind of long stop date, which is no one wants to get to that 10 years, because at least before, when you became deemed domiciled, if you at least had set up your protected settlement beforehand, or at least you could be happy that the assets in the trust would be protected. But the fact that you now bring yourself and your personally held assets into the scope of IHT, and at the same time tip all of your trust of which you're a settler into the IHT net at the same time, is again just another point which has driven behaviour changes about leaving the UK, reducing the length of time that you're here, and then as a consequence of that, thinking about, well, if I'm only going to be here for X or Y number of years, helpful to have effectively a deferral mechanism until I'm inevitably going to relocate elsewhere.
Okay, so I think we've worked out there's plenty of good reasons why people are considering this.
Yes.
What sort of structures, products have you seen? I mean, obviously, we all instantly think of the life insurance bond.
Yes, agreed.
Have you seen much of that?
Yeah, so one thing I should also say is that when I was on secondment at the end, I was on secondment from the budget in the 30th October budget in 2024 through till the end of that tax year. So that during that 6 months running up to the April changes. So I was a private bank, and as a consequence, there were plenty of discussions with their high net worth clients about, well, what are my options, and what are these changes? How do they impact me? How do they impact my trust? What are the options available? I did see a lot of discussion of the use of offshore bonds in that context as one of a many number of options. They have some significant pros, and they also have some significant cons. The pro is that you do get the roll up that you anticipate, which is great. The cons is that they are to an extent a sort of inflexible products, because you don't have the full investment flexibility that you would if you were to invest in any other kind of vehicle, because fundamentally they are a kind of regulated investment product that was designed for a certain purpose, which now just happens to have another ancillary benefit for another group of individuals that
I think the risk of getting that investment allocation wrong or having too much control over it is so great that unless someone's prepared to just have a portfolio with a manager, it kind of almost takes them off the table.
Yeah, so totally agree. Obviously, the rules you're getting out there are the PPB rules. So basically, you fall foul of them, and your bond is treated as a personal portfolio bond. The rules that apply are beyond punitive.
Yes.
So yeah, unless you've got someone, and there are people out there, of course, and it may be also that it is an appropriate product or solution for a portion of your balance sheet, which is the portion that you're happily to have on a kind of hold on a discretionary mandate with manager X somewhere. That might be fine, but of course, there's in the people that we're acting for, you and I, obviously, their interests are kind of far more varied and often more complex than
and esoteric. Yeah.
Exactly.
They want to dictate where their private equity investment is or whatever, and it's quite often they're also people with significant investment experience themselves, and they don't like that loss of control.
No, so agreed.
already acknowledging they've lost control because they're not the trustee. But if you take away their ability to act as, say, an investment advisor to the structure because it's all within this wrapper and the constraints of the wrapper, that stuff. So I mean, we've talked about, and we have actually implemented a few sort of what we call private funds, because there is a private investment fund regime in Guernsey,
Yes.
which is a regulatory regime, which limits the amount of regulatory oversight for limited categories of funds. So for want of a better term, because of, and I'm sure you'll say that funds take a number of forms. But have you seen the use of people looking to funds as an option?
Yes. So the kind of natural follow-up step from um, here are the new rules. This is how they've impacted me. Oh, I'm subject to tax on an arising basis. What are my solutions? And we start at, well, one of them is this offshore bond, and as you say, for the reasons that we've gone over, not always appropriate. So then the next question is, well, where do we go? And you've then got various decisions because, as you said, those funds that are capable of being established within that private funds regime in Guernsey are varied because you can set them up as a corporate, you can set them up as a unit trust, you can set it up as some kind of other foreign vehicle that works.
An LP structure, for example.
Yeah, exactly. So you get into that next category of solution, which is, well, have you thought about investing in one of these effectively collective investment vehicles? Because your other alternative, of course, is where you could invest via a kind of UK company, which that would be fine. But again, it's going to be subject to corporation tax, which is a view that some people take as fine and others less so. But yes, so obviously the Guernsey is a relatively new regime, the funds regime that you were mentioning.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, it broadly, there's two categories. There's the family private investment fund, which it limits the investors to connected family members and their structures. So if you just want a structure for your family as sort of a family investment vehicle, that works quite nicely. Or there's the qualifying what we call a PIF, private investment fund, and that's more akin to the sort of regime you see with a number of US funds where you've got to be a certain category of investor to be deemed qualified enough to make a decision to invest in what is essentially an unregulated fund. It's not unregulated, but comparative to, open market funds.
Yeah, exactly. So it is it is unregulated in the sense that it's not retail.
Exactly.
It is regulated on a light touch regulation basis by the new Guernsey funds regime. But yeah, so typically these are solutions that are kind of offered to sophisticated investors, eligible employees of financial institutions, people who understand and are capable of taking the risk on essentially on investments of this type. And yeah, so we've seen a lot of those. And so there is a question as to, well, what form does it take? Because these vehicles can be corporates, they can be unit trusts, they can be LP structures, as you said. But one of the main benefits that you're getting is because the UK obviously has its own taxing regime that applies to offshore funds. They present a potential opportunity whereby you can get the roll up or potentially benefit from the roll up that you would get from an offshore life insurance bond, but with the greater investment flexibility, because it is you and your managers that are the ones that are determining the investment direction. The vehicles are capable of holding much more kind of sophisticated and varied asset classes, and so you're benefiting from that regime. Yeah, you get that additional flexibility.
I think it more allows you to more closely mirror your previous portfolio situation as well. So if you were looking to attract this deferral, that it gets you into a position where you haven't had to change your investment strategy necessarily because it's within this wrapper, which to some is amazing. It's like, well, we've been doing all right, let's keep doing what we're doing. And whereas you can't necessarily do that with the offshore bond.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
the other big advantage that I think there is that I see is the ability to come in and out of the funds. much more freely than with the offshore bonds, because obviously the rules, if you return more than 5% of the original capital in any year in an offshore bond, they're also quite penal. They do like to attack people who use deferral vehicles. So the ability to sell part of your fund or redeem part of your fund investment if you need the cash is I think quite appealing. It's not so daunting for people to say, oh well, oh no, what do you mean my money's tied up? My money, obviously, not the trustees' money, my money,
Yeah, of course.
is tied up for the next 20 years. I can't get it back.
Yeah.
So I think that does appeal, particularly in a globally mobile society,
Mhm.
because yes, some of these investment products work quite well from the UK perspective, but if you go to another jurisdiction, if you, heaven forbid, you to move to the US,
Yep.
can you imagine moving to the US with a private fund? It's almost certainly going to be a PFIC.
Mhm, mhm.
So at that point, family situations may require a readjustment.
Yeah, exactly. And the benefit of these vehicles as well is that there's one, as you said, which is kind of caters for kind of specific family, uh, collective family investment, as it were. But the point is the ability of people to come in and out, the flexibility for it to represent a vehicle in which multiple family members can invest from different jurisdictions with their own kind of different tax regimes. Um, all very attractive. But the thing we're obviously relying on there is for the most part, and I anticipate that with the new regime in Guernsey, you essentially there are large collective investment vehicles of whatever form in which you essentially have a sleeve or similar, in which you then replicate your existing investment kind of portfolio with one and or multiple managers or cells or whatever to be treated as reporting or non-reporting. And then the crucial difference in that sense being that, well, if they're reporting, you effectively accept taxation on income arising for the benefit of realizing a gain on disposal. The alternative is that you don't make any claim for reporting status at all. Far more likely that you don't get any income attribution. And when you dispose, you would realize an offshore income gain, which is a gain but subject to income tax. But crucially, if you're not going to realize that while you're in this kind of what you foresee to be this temporary period of UK residence or otherwise, you have subject to kind of looking at other anti-avoidance generally, you have created the roll-up that we're discussing here, which is a lack of income attribution either to you or the trust and its beneficiaries, but also in the case of gains. So there's a lot of interest in these types of vehicles, and also particularly lots of individuals who have assets that are mainly like gain generating. It's just the ability to kind of roll up gains is like it is a big kind of driver of
You almost accept income.
agreed. That's basically the point that I'm getting at. I think the what I have come across a lot is people who are doing exactly what you're saying, which is accepting an income liability. But if it results in CGT roll up, then that's a decision worth making.
Exactly. And I think ultimately, with a lot of these structures, actually, from my experience in Guernsey, is that the way the fee structure is for them, until they've been up and running for a while, there's unlikely to be sufficient income to meet their share of the costs. So you end up having a debt owed to the capital account by the income account until such time as there is any income, and then that's repaid. So it's a long time. It's potentially quite a long time before you start throwing off enough income to give rise to tax charges.
Yeah, yeah. Well,
So,
even more attractive.
and then that's not on any sort of aggressive attribution of fees. It's a sort of fairly standard if you're looking at a trust arrangement of a 30-70 split or something like that. But just because of the nature of the investments of a lot of these big families that you see, they're not massively income generating anyway. They tend to be long-term holds.
Yeah. Buy and hold essentially.
Yeah, for things that they think are going to turn around and produce them a significant gain. And as I expect quite often it's maybe 1 in 10 if they're lucky.
Yeah, sure. Well, those 1 in 10 work out quite well for them, though. So,
They do. I wouldn't mind one of those.
yeah, agreed. Sign me up. Sign me up.
Is there any downsides that you consider to these
I
sort of
think
structures?
so I think that it's not a downside per se, but I think the one thing is just before they launch into something, because this does all sound basically from what you're saying, like this is obviously fantastic. I mean, everyone should be doing it
Of course.
immediately.
No.
Um, I suppose the points are is like from at least in my experience, the point is here is that the barriers to entry are that typically it's sophisticated investors who need to go who this is being targeted at. The fees for these structures are kind of commensurate with the individuals that they are attracting. Um, Before kind of launching into it and appreciating that they're kind of multiple. It's not just always the roll up that people are looking for. It might be a factor, but there might be a kind of multitude of factors that people are thinking about when they're kind of deciding to invest in one of these vehicles. But it's just making sure, just from the UK, I've got my UK tax hat on. But obviously just making sure that you kind of run through all the relevant UK anti-avoidance. And just the reason for that is, of course, is that in all these cases, just transferring assets to essentially a vehicle offshore isn't necessarily always the bullet it's perceived to be, because there are, funnily enough, as you well know, the provisions that can essentially operate to make those transfers ineffective for what you're trying to do. Now, probably not for this call, but there's plenty of arguments kind of pro and against, like, well, when they apply and when they don't apply. But it's just before you go ahead and invest significant amount of money in a structure that's going to cost money to set up and money to run, just be covering off all the relevant points. Now, they may work exactly as you intend them to, and then fantastic, but
Yeah.
it's just worth covering off before.
And also, the ability to come out if you need to, because let's face it, who knows what the tax rules are going to be in 5 years' time.
Yeah, well, honestly, I'm surprised you said 5. I mean, who knows now you think 5 years is like, that seems like a long window. So we will see.
Hopefully I've retired by then.
Yeah, well, dreaming. Yeah, and I suppose on that point though is even 5 years as a window, because that does seem quite far away. But there is, I'm pretty sure there's a active consultation, either it's in hand or they've finished getting their results. But how those anti-avoidance rules operate in the UK is
They're never going to go the way I want to go.
well, no, exactly, but it's kind of that will be an interesting next step, because how those rules operate in the context of either existing or future structuring contexts will be interesting to see. It might give some more clarity over which of these forms of offshore collective investment vehicle is greater or lesser than others. My understanding is that the Guernsey regime essentially kind of enables you to create the form. They're kind of agnostic as to form. It's an ability to form these funds, and to do so on a quite time cost efficient basis. That is the kind of selling point.
Thank you for your time today, John. It's been a really interesting discussion. It would be helpful for us to hear how Winston-Taylor can help high net worth individuals who may be encountering some of these issues.
Yeah, absolutely. So, firstly, thanks again for having me. Yes, we here at the new combination Winston-Taylor provide ultra high net worth individuals and families on all types of tax structuring and succession advice, and including as it relates to the use of these offshore structures. So if they've ever got any questions, we are always here to help.
Thank you. And as you know, you'll be aware, Ocorian, particularly in Guernsey, have dealt with a number of the private investment funds already. We're seeing quite a lot of interest. In addition to those, we also deal with corporates, trusts, and foundations to facilitate whatever advice you happen to give your clients.
Yeah, perfect.
So,
No, that's great to know. It's been good to
thank you.
speak. Thank you.
Thank you.